The lights of Harmony 7 Station sparkled like stars against the black canvas of space. Inside the massive diplomatic hub, thousands of beings from across the galaxy moved through corridors designed to accommodate every imaginable body type. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some flew on wings, while others slithered across the smooth floors. Minho pressed his face against the transparent wall, watching a cargo ship drift past the station. He was 8 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. His mother had told him to stay close during the reception, but the adult conversation had grown boring. All they talked about was trade agreements and resource allocations. Minho wanted to explore. The reception hall behind him buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages, all translated by the small devices everyone wore. His mother Jiwan was deep in conversation with a floating jellyfish creature from the Andromeda sector. She gestured with her hands as she spoke, her diplomatic smile never wavering. She hadn't noticed Minho slipping away. The corridor outside the reception hall was quieter. Minho walked slowly, his shoes making soft sounds on the metal floor. Strange symbols marked the walls, directions written in languages he couldn't read. A small robot rolled past him, beeping pleasantly. Minho followed it, wondering where it was going. The corridors changed as he walked. The walls became darker, the lights dimmer. Fewer people passed by. Minho realized he had wandered into a section of the station he wasn't supposed to be in. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, telling him to always stay in the public areas. But surely it was okay to explore a little bit. The station was safe. Everyone said so. He turned a corner and bumped into something hard. Minho stumbled backward and looked up. A massive creature loomed over him, easily, 3 meters tall. It had features like a bird of prey, with a sharp beak, yellow eyes, and feathers that shimmered with an oil-slick rainbow effect. It wore a uniform marked with symbols Minho didn't recognize. An officer of some kind. "Sorry," Minho said quickly, his translator device converting his words. "I didn't mean to." The creature's head snapped down toward him. Those yellow eyes narrowed. When it spoke, its voice came out as harsh screeches that the translator rendered into cold, clipped words. "Human juvenile. This sector is restricted. You are trespassing." "I'm sorry," Minho repeated, taking a step back. "I'll go back." The creature moved faster than Minho thought possible. One moment it was standing there, the next its clawed hand had wrapped around Minho's arm. The grip was incredibly tight, like iron bands crushing his flesh. Minho gasped in pain. "Juveniles must be taught discipline," the creature said. "Its name badge read Velthor, Scaran Enforcement Corps. You will learn respect." Velthar lifted Minho off the ground by his arm. The boy felt something in his arm crack, a sound and sensation that made his stomach turn. Before he could even cry out, Velthor slammed him against the corridor wall. Minho's head hit the metal with a terrible sound. Pain exploded through his skull. His vision went white, then dark around the edges. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His arm was on fire, his head pounding. When Velthar released him, Minho crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. "Minimal force applied," Velthar said, speaking into a recording device. "Trespasser has been neutralized." Resuming patrol? Minho tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Blood ran down his face from where his head had struck the wall. His arm lay at an odd angle. He opened his mouth and screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the corridor. The scream brought people running. A maintenance worker, some slug-like creature, saw Minho first and immediately triggered an emergency alarm. Within seconds, the corridor filled with beings. Someone called for medical help. Someone else tried to touch Minho, but the boy screamed again at the contact. G1 heard the commotion from the reception hall. She heard her son scream and knew, the way mothers know, that it was Minho. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her diplomatic dress hampering her movement. Other humans from the delegation followed her. When G1 rounded the corner and saw her son lying on the floor in a pool of blood, she felt her heart stop. Her little boy, her Minho, lay broken on the cold metal floor. His arm was bent wrong. His face was covered in blood. His eyes were closed. Minho. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his body, afraid to touch him and cause more pain. Baby, mommy's here? Mommy's here. Dae-yoon, the human security chief, arrived moments later. He was a big man, heavily muscled, with a face that rarely showed emotion. But when he saw Minho, something changed in his expression. Something dark and dangerous. What happened? His voice was very quiet. Too quiet. The slug-like maintenance worker explained in a trembling voice. It had seen Velthor throw the child against the wall. Had seen the officer walk away like nothing happened. Medical staff arrived with a stretcher designed for humans. They moved Minho carefully, their faces showing concern. One of them, a human doctor, looked at Ji-won with serious eyes. We need to get him to the human medical bay immediately. He has significant trauma. Gi-won climbed onto the stretcher with her son, cradling his head in her lap. I'm not leaving him. As they rushed through the corridors, other beings watched. Most looked confused. Some looked sympathetic. A few looked curious. Like this was interesting but not particularly concerning. Dae-yoon watched them go, then turned to the security footage access panel on the wall. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, he had pulled up the recording of what happened. He watched it 3 times, his face growing harder with each viewing. Then he pulled out his encrypted communicator and sent a message to Earth. The message was simple. Human child attacked by station security. Critically injured? Requesting immediate authorization for response protocols, Dae-yoon stood in that corridor for a long moment, watching alien beings pass by, going about their daily business. They didn't understand yet. Didn't know what they had done, but they would learn. Soon, they would all learn what it meant to hurt a human child. In the human medical bay, doctors worked frantically. Minho's arm was shattered in 3 places. His skull had a hairline fracture. He had internal bleeding. For a human child, these were life-threatening injuries. Gi-won held her son's small hand, the one that wasn't broken, and wept silently. Around her, machines beeped and hummed. Medical staff called out readings and adjustments. Someone was explaining that they needed to operate immediately, but Ji-won heard none of it. She only saw her little boy, so small and fragile on the medical bed, breathing shallowly through a mask. She remembered the day he was born, how tiny he had been in her arms. She remembered his first steps, his first words, his laugh when she tickled him, and she remembered Officer Velthor's name. The name was burned into her mind now, seared there by pain and rage and a mother's protective fury. Velthor, the creature who had hurt her child. Outside the medical bay, Dae-yoon received a response to his message. He read it once, then looked up at the station around him. His expression was grim. Acknowledged, he whispered to himself. Response protocols authorized. The message had come from the highest levels of Earth's government, and it said just one thing: protect our children. Use any means necessary. Surgery lasted for hours. Gi-won sat in the waiting room, her dress still stained with Minho's blood. Other members of the human delegation sat with her, their faces grim. Nobody spoke much. What was there to say? Ambassador Hyun-woo arrived from the main council building, still wearing his formal robes. He was an older man with gray hair and a face lined with years of diplomatic service. He had negotiated trade deals, settled disputes, and represented humanity in 1,000 meetings. But nothing in his career had prepared him for this. How is he? Hyun-woo asked, sitting beside Ji-won. They're operating now, she said, her voice hollow. His arm is broken in 3 places. His skull is fractured. They said there's internal bleeding. She turned to look at the ambassador, and her eyes were like ice. They said if he were any other species' child, the impact would have killed him instantly. Hyun-woo closed his eyes. I've already filed for an emergency council hearing. They're reviewing the request. Reviewing. Gi-won's voice rose. My son is in surgery because their officer decided to use him as a lesson in discipline, and they're reviewing. Dae-yeon entered the waiting room, a tablet in his hand. I have the security footage. I've also pulled Velthor's service record. He looked at Hyunwoo. You need to see this. They moved to a private room. Daeyoon pulled up the footage on a large screen. They watched in silence as Veltor grabbed Minho, lifted him, and slammed him against the wall. They watched the officer record his report and walk away. They watched Minho lie bleeding on the floor until help arrived. Hyunwoo's hands clenched into fists. What about his service record? This isn't the first time, Daeyeon said quietly. Velthor has had 17 complaints filed against him for excessive force. 12 of those involved juveniles from other species. He pulled up the records. But none of those species filed formal protests. I looked into it. Their young are more durable than human children. They heal faster. What Velthar does to them is harsh, but not life-threatening. He didn't know, Kiwon said. He didn't know human children are fragile. Should have known, Daeyeon replied, his voice hard. It's his job to know. Station regulations require security officers to understand the physical limitations of all member species. He was briefed on human physiology when we joined the council 3 years ago. Hyunwoo stared at the frozen image on the screen, Velthor's clawed hand wrapped around Minho's small arm. Where is he now? Administrative leave, Daeyeon said. Still on the station? Still free? In orbit above the station, Captain Salman stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force vessel, indomitable. She was reading the report from Daeyeon, and with each line, her expression grew darker. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. They had all heard what happened, ma'am, her communications officer said. We're receiving multiple requests from the station. They want to know why we've armed our weapons systems. Tell them it's a routine drill, Salman said, not looking away from the report. They're not buying it, Captain. Council security is demanding we stand down. Salman finally looked up. Her eyes were cold. Remind Council security that we are in free space, above the station. We have every right to conduct drills as we see fit. She paused. And tell them that if they don't like it, they can file a complaint. We'll review it eventually. Her tactical officer, a young man named Junho, turned in his chair. Captain, permission to speak freely? Granted, they hurt a kid. Junho's voice was tight with anger. An 8-year-old boy. If we don't do something, we will do something, Salman interrupted. But we'll do it right. We wait for orders from Earth Command. She looked around at her crew. Everyone on this ship wants justice for that child, but we don't act like animals. We act like professionals. Understood? Yes, ma'am, the crew responded. But Summon's hands were clenched on the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white. She wanted to aim every weapon at the station and demand they hand over Velthor. She wanted to make them understand that you don't hurt children. Not ever. Back on the station, the council finally agreed to a hearing. But not immediately. They scheduled it for 3 days later. 3 days while Minho lay in a hospital bed. 3 days while Velthor walked free. Hyunwoo stood before Counselor Vexfer, a reptilian being who served as the arbitrator for the case. The counselor sat behind a massive desk, his scales gleaming in the light. Ambassador Hyunwoo, Vexfer said in a bored tone. I understand you're upset about the incident with your juvenile, but these matters take time. There are procedures. Procedures, Hyunwoo repeated slowly. My people have a saying, Counselor. Justice delayed is justice denied. Your people are new to the council, Vexfer said. You must learn patience. Officer Velthair has served with distinction for 20 years. He maintains that he used minimal force appropriate for a trespassing juvenile. Minimal force? Hyenwa's voice was very quiet. He broke my child's arm. He fractured his skull. He caused internal bleeding. If that's minimal force, I would hate to see what maximum force looks like. The juvenile was in a restricted area. He's 8 years old. Hyunwoo's composure cracked. He's a child who got lost. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't armed. He was scared and trying to apologize, and your officer decided to teach him a lesson by nearly killing him. Vexfer leaned back. I see you are emotional. Perhaps we should postpone this discussion until you are calmer. Hyunwoo stared at the counselor for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, placing his hands on the desk. Let me tell you something about humans, counselor. We are very calm right now. You should hope we stay this way. That evening, news of the incident reached Earth. The broadcast showed footage of Minho being carried to the medical bay. Blood on his face, his small body limp. They showed Juwan's tear-stained face as she begged doctors to save her son. They showed the security footage of Velthair attacking the boy. Earth erupted. Protests filled the streets of every major city. People demanded action. Parents held their own children close and wept for Minho. Politicians gave speeches about justice and protection. Military officials held emergency meetings, and in the Galactic Council's Earth Embassy, the ambassador from Velthar species, the Scarans, found himself surrounded by angry humans. Security had to evacuate him for his own safety. On Harmony 7, other species began to notice changes in human behavior. The humans who had always been polite, always been friendly, weren't smiling anymore. Human security officers moved through the corridors with a different energy. They didn't run. They didn't rush. They walked with the slow, steady pace of predators stalking prey. A minor incident occurred in the station's commercial district. A Scaran trader made a comment about how human children should be better supervised. A human security officer named Tajon overheard. He walked over to the trader, grabbed him by the front of his clothing, and lifted him off the ground with one hand. "Say that again," Tajon said quietly. The Scaran tried to speak but couldn't. Tajon's grip was too tight. "That's what I thought," Tajon said, and threw the trader into a wall. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but hard enough to make a point. Then he walked away as if nothing had happened. Station security tried to arrest Tajon. Dayan intervened, his hand resting on his weapon. "You'll have to go through me first," station security officer. A multi-armed creature from a peaceful species looked at Dayan's face and decided that filing a report was a better option than confronting this human. That night, Jiwan sat beside Minho's bed in the medical bay. Her son was breathing on his own now, which the doctor said was a good sign, but he hadn't woken up yet. His small face was pale, bruises darkening his skin. His arm was in a cast, suspended in a support frame. "I'm so sorry, baby," Jiwan whispered, brushing hair from his forehead. "Mommy should have watched you better. Should have kept you safe." Doctor entered, a human woman named Yunji, who specialized in trauma. "Mrs. Jiwan, you need to rest. I can't leave him. Then I'll bring you a cot." Yunji checked the monitors, making small adjustments. "He's strong. He's going to make it. Is he?" Giwan looked up at the doctor. "Be honest with me. What are his chances?" Yunji was quiet for a moment. "If he were an adult, I'd say 90%. But he's a child. His body is still developing. The head trauma is serious." She paused. "But I've seen children survive worse. Don't give up hope." After the doctor left, Giwan held her son's hand and began to sing softly. An old lullaby from Earth. Her voice cracked on the words, but she kept singing. Outside the medical bay, human security officers stood guard. Nobody would get close to Minho again. Nobody would hurt him again. And far above, the Indomitable waited in orbit, weapons charged, crew ready. Captain Soman had received her orders from Earth Command. Orders that made her smile grimly. The message was simple. All necessary force authorized. Protect our people. Dr. Yunji stood before Ambassador Hyunwoo and a room full of human delegation members. Behind her, a holographic display showed detailed scans of Minho's injuries. The ambassador's face was carved from stone as he listened. "These injuries would have killed most juvenile species instantly," Yunji explained, pointing to the skull fracture. "The impact force Velthar used was equivalent to being hit by a small vehicle. A Scaran juvenile would have survived with minor bruising. A Peltheran juvenile might have needed a few hours of rest. But a human child?" She shook her head. "Minho survived because of luck and immediate medical intervention." "Why are human children so fragile?" Someone asked. "We're not fragile," Unji corrected. "We're adapted to a high-gravity world with extreme environmental conditions. But that adaptation takes time. Human children don't reach full durability until adolescence. Until then, their bones are still growing, their organs are still developing. They're vulnerable in ways that other species young aren't. Hyunwoo leaned forward. Does the council understand this? They do now, Yanji replied. I submitted a full report on human juvenile physiology this morning. I also included comparisons with other species. She pulled up another image. This is what Velthar's attack should have looked like to him, based on his species standards. To him, he was administering a mild correction, like a parent tapping a child's hand. Except he nearly killed Minho, Daeon said from the back of the room. Exactly. Youngji closed the display. I'm testifying at the council hearing tomorrow. They need to understand what they're dealing with. What we are. After the meeting, Hyunwoo walked through the station corridors toward the council chambers. He needed to submit additional documentation for the hearing. As he walked, he noticed something. Aliens were watching humans differently now. Not with curiosity or friendliness, with caution, sometimes with fear. A small child from the Peltherin species ran down the corridor, chasing a floating toy. The child's parent called out an alarm, then physically pulled the child away when it got close to a human security officer. The human officer, a young woman named Yuna, watched this with a sad expression. They're afraid of us now, Yuna said when Hyunwoo approached. Can you blame them? Hyunwoo replied. They're finally realizing what Earth is. A death world, Yuna said quietly. The term had started circulating among the alien species. Earth, they discovered, was classified as a Class 9 death world. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, atmospheric pressure that would crush beings from lighter worlds, oceans full of salt that would poison most species, weather patterns that included hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards, an entire planet that was actively trying to kill everything on it, and humans had not just survived there, they had thrived. They had climbed to the top of the food chain and built civilizations. They had looked at their deadly world and decided to master it. Other species began researching Earth's wildlife. What they found terrified them. Predators with jaws that could crush bone. Insects that could kill with a single sting. Plants that were toxic to touch. Viruses and bacteria that evolved almost as fast as you could fight them. And humans lived among all of this. Humans had evolved alongside apex predators and learned to hunt them. A counselor from the Vrick species, a race of peaceful herbivores, watched video footage of Earth and felt sick. There was a scene of a human child, no older than Minho, laughing as a massive four-legged creature licked the child's face. The creature had fangs like knives. It could have killed the child in seconds. What is that monster? The Vrick's counselor asked his aide. Humans call it a dog, the aide replied. It's their pack companion. They domesticated it thousands of years ago. They domesticated a predator. They domesticated many predators, counselor. Humans are? The aide paused, searching for words. They're very good at domestication. That night, Lieutenant Commander Yemen arrived on the station with his special operations team. There were 12 of them, all wearing black uniforms with minimal insignia. They moved through the station like shadows, their footsteps silent, their expressions unreadable. Daeon met them at the docking bay. Welcome to Harmony 7. Yemen nodded. Where's the target? Velthar has quarters in the security section. He's still on administrative leave, but they haven't confined him. Good, Yemen said, smiling. It wasn't a pleasant smile. That makes things easier. Easier for what? Daeyoon asked, though he already knew the answer. For ensuring he understands the situation. The special operations team dispersed throughout the station. Officially as additional security for the human delegation. Unofficially, they were hunters, and they had found their prey. Velthar first noticed them 3 days after Minho's attack. The Scarran officer was in a station cantina, drinking with fellow security officers. He was explaining again that he had done nothing wrong. The human juvenile had been trespassing. He had used minimal force. These humans were overreacting. Then he saw them. 3 humans sat at a table across the cantina. They weren't eating, weren't drinking. They were just sitting there, watching him. When Velthar made eye contact, none of them looked away. They just stared with those forward-facing predator eyes. Velthar felt. It's something he hadn't felt in years. Fear, he left the cantina through the back exit. The humans didn't follow. But when he reached his quarters, there were two different humans standing in the corridor. They nodded politely as he passed, but their eyes tracked his every movement. Over the next 2 days, Velthor couldn't go anywhere without seeing humans. They were always nearby, always watching. They never spoke to him, never threatened him. They just watched with the patience of predators waiting for the right moment to strike. Other scarents on the station began avoiding Velthor. His own species was distancing themselves from him. The Scaran ambassador issued a statement saying that Velthor's actions didn't represent Scaran values, that they were appalled by what happened. Velthor found himself alone, surrounded by silent human hunters. On the 4th day after the attack, Minho woke up. Jiwan was dozing in the chair beside his bed when she heard a small sound. Her eyes snapped open. Minho's eyes were open, looking around in confusion. Minho. She was at his side instantly, her hand gently touching his face. Baby, you're awake, Mommy. His voice was weak and confused. What happened? Where am I? You're in the hospital, sweetheart. You had an accident. She was crying and smiling at the same time. But you're okay now. You're going to be okay. My arm hurts, Minho said, looking at the cast. I know, baby. The doctors will give you medicine for the pain. Dr. Yoonji rushed in, summoned by the monitors. She quickly checked Minho's vital signs, shined lights in his eyes, asked him questions. After a few minutes, she stepped back with a relieved smile. He's responding well. This is very good news. She looked at Jiwan. He's not out of danger yet, but this is a major step forward. News of Minho waking up spread through the human delegation within minutes. Then it spread through the station. The aliens who had been watching the situation with academic interest suddenly saw something that disturbed them deeply. Someone had leaked footage from the medical bay. It showed Minho small and weak in the hospital bed asking for his mother. It showed Giwan crying as she held her son's hand. It showed the boy asking what happened, confused and scared. Beings across the station watched this and felt uncomfortable. This wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't a diplomatic incident or a legal matter. This was a child who had been hurt, a mother who had suffered, and the being responsible was walking free. Public opinion began to shift. Species that had been neutral started speaking out. The peaceful Vrix issued a statement supporting humanity's call for justice. The aquatic Delphi sent representatives to visit Minho. Even some Scarans privately expressed shame about Velthar's actions. But the council still delayed. Still talked about procedures and jurisdiction and proper channels in orbit. Captain Soman received a priority transmission from Earth. She read it twice, then called her senior officers to the bridge. Earth Command has issued new orders, she said. We are to take up tactical positions around the station. If the Council doesn't deliver justice within 48 hours, we are authorized to retrieve Velthar ourselves. Her tactical officer looked shocked. Captain, that's a direct violation of Council sovereignty. I'm aware, Soman replied calmly. I'm also aware that they hurt one of our children, and they're doing nothing about it. Command has decided that Council sovereignty is less important than protecting human interests. This could start a war, someone said. Someone looked at her crew. Let me be very clear. I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope the Council sees reason. But if they don't, if they decide that their bureaucracy is more important than justice, then yes, we will act. And if that starts a war, then it starts a war. Because the alternative is teaching the galaxy that humans can be hurt without consequences. And that is something Earth will never accept. The Indomitable moved into position, joined by 2 other Earth vessels that had quietly arrived in the system. The 3 ships formed a triangle around the station, their weapon systems armed and ready. It was a clear message visible to every sensor on the station in his quarters. Velthor watched the ships move into position and realized something terrifying. The humans weren't going to let this go. They weren't going to accept Council justice or Council procedures. They were going to come for him, and nobody was going to stop them. Fleet Admiral Kung Su arrived on Harmony 7, with 5 more warships. The Earth Defense Force fleet now numbered 8 vessels. all positioned around the station in a formation that any military analyst would recognize as a siege position. The message was clear. The station was surrounded. Kung Su was a man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen combat. He had fought in the resource wars on Earth, had commanded the first human vessel to leave the solar system, and had negotiated the treaty that brought humanity into the Galactic Council. He was not a man who made empty threats. He walked through the station toward the council chambers with Ambassador Hyun-woo at his side. Behind them came a full security detail, all armed, all moving with military precision. Aliens in the corridors pressed themselves against walls to let them pass. "The council is panicking," Hunhwa said quietly. "High Speaker Orndith has called for an emergency session," Good Kung Su replied. "Let them panic. Maybe it will help them understand urgency." They entered the council chambers, a massive circular room with seats for representatives from 200 species. The room was full. Every council member had come to see what the humans would do. At the center of the room, on an elevated platform, sat High Speaker Orndith, a being that looked like a cross between a mantis and a tree. With bark-like skin and multiple eyes on stalks, Admiral Kung Su, Orndith's voice, echoed through the chamber. "You have brought warships to our station. You have armed weapons in neutral space. You have violated protocols, you heard our child," Kung Su interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chamber like a knife. "Everything else is secondary to that fact. The incident is being investigated," Orndith said. "Officer Velthor has been placed on administrative leave. The council is preparing a full review." "We don't want a review," Hyun-woo stepped forward. "We want justice. And we want it now." Counselor Vexver, the reptilian arbitrator, spoke up. "Ambassador, you must understand that council law requires time. We have procedures. We must hear testimony from all parties. We must review evidence. We cannot simply—" "You've had 6 days," Kung Su said flatly. 6 days while an 8-year-old boy lay in a hospital bed. 6 days while the being who hurt him walked free. 6 days to do what should have taken 6 hours. He looked around the chamber. "Your procedures mean nothing to us. Your laws mean nothing to us. Not when they protect those who hurt children." A Vrix counselor stood. "Admiral, we understand your anger. But this is a matter of law. If we bend the rules for one species, we must bend them for all." "Then bend them," Kung Su said. "Because if you don't, we will break them." The chamber erupted into chaos. Counselors shouting in dozens of languages, all translated into a cacophony of sound. Orndith tried to restore order, but the noise only grew louder. A new voice cut through the chaos. "Perhaps I can explain what you're dealing with." Everyone turned. A human woman walked to the center of the chamber. She was young, with kind eyes and a calm expression. She wore the robes of a xenopsychologist. "My name is Hannah," she said. "I specialize in cross-species psychology. I've been studying the galaxy's species for 10 years, and I think there's something you don't understand about humans." "What is there to understand?" Dexver said dismissively. "They're emotional, irrational. We evolved as pack hunters on a death world," Hannah interrupted. "Do you know what that means?" "It means we've spent millions of years learning to work together to bring down prey larger and more dangerous than ourselves. It means we developed an instinct to protect members of our pack at any cost, especially the young." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's ecosystem. "This is a lion, an apex predator from our world. If you threaten a lion's cub, the lion will fight to the death to protect it. It won't stop. It won't negotiate. It will kill you or die trying." She looked around the chamber. "Now imagine that instinct in a species that can build starships." The chamber went very quiet. "You didn't just hurt Minho," Hannah continued. "You hurt one of our cubs. And every human, from Earth to the frontier colonies, feels that attack as if it happened to their own child. That's not emotion. That's biology. That's millions of years of evolution telling us that if we don't protect our young, our species dies. Are you threatening us?" Orndith asked. "No," Hannah said simply. "I'm explaining. Humans don't want war. We don't want conflict. But we will burn down the galaxy before we let harm come to our children. That's not a threat. That's just a fact about who we are." She stepped back, her presentation finished. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Kung Su spoke again, his voice calm but implacable. "The Council has offered standard arbitration, financial compensation, and Velthor's dismissal from service. We reject this." "Then what do you want?" Orndith asked. "We want Velthor to face trial under human law for assault of a minor. We want him imprisoned in a human facility where we can ensure he actually serves his sentence. We want changes to station security protocols to prevent this from ever happening again. And we want it in writing that any being who harms a human child will face human justice, not council bureaucracy." "Possible," Dexfer said. "That would violate council sovereignty. It would set a precedent. You've set precedents before," Hyunwoo interrupted. He pulled up records on a display. 20 years ago, the Korthax Empire demanded special jurisdiction over crimes committed against their citizens. You gave it to them. 15 years ago, the Peltherin Collective demanded autonomous legal authority. You gave it to them. 5 years ago, the Vrix requested protection for their sacred sites. You gave it to them. He looked around the chamber. So don't tell us about precedence and sovereignty. You've bent the rules for species that were powerful enough, or important enough. The question is simple. Are we powerful enough? Are we important enough? Is that a threat? Someone asked. No, Kung Su said. It's a question. 1. You have 24 hours to answer. He turned and walked out of the chamber, Hyunwoo, and the security detail following. Behind them, the council erupted into argument again, back on the Indomitable. Captain Soman received reports from all 8 ships in the fleet. All vessels report ready status, Admiral. Weapons charged, shields at maximum. We can commence operations on your order. Stand by, Kung Su said. Let's see if they're smart enough to avoid this. But even as he said it, his tactical teams were planning. They had mapped every corridor of the station. They knew where Velthor's quarters were. They knew the security protocols, the guard rotations, the emergency procedures. If the order came, they could extract Velthor in less than 10 minutes. The question was whether the council would force them to do it. On the station, Yemen's special operations team had their own plans. They were closer to Velthor. They could move faster. If extraction became necessary, they were ready. Yemen found himself in the same corridor as Velthor that evening. The Scaran officer tried to walk past quickly, but Yemen stepped into his path. Officer Velthor, Yemen said pleasantly. We haven't been introduced. I'm Lieutenant Commander Yemen, Earth Special Operations. Velthor tried to move around him, but Yemen moved too, staying in his way. I wanted you to know something. That child you hurt? His name is Minho. He's 8 years old. He likes drawing pictures and playing with toy spaceships. His favorite food is something called Tiakboki. He wants to be an explorer when he grows up. Get out of my way, Velthor said, his voice harsh. I just want you to understand, Yemen continued, still smiling. He's not a statistic. He's not a diplomatic incident. He's a real child with a real life. And you tried to take that away from him. I was doing my job.
Ow.
Yemen's smile disappeared. You were being cruel to someone weaker than you, because you could. Because nobody had ever stopped you before. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. But we're going to stop you. One way or another, maybe the council will hand you over. Maybe they won't. Either way, you will face justice. You will pay for what you did. And when you're sitting in a human prison, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that we gave them a chance to do this the right way. Yemen stepped aside, letting Velthor pass. The Scaran hurried away, his feathers ruffled with fear. That night, Minho asked his mother a question. Mommy, why are there so many people outside? I can hear them talking. Guan looked toward the door of the medical bay, where human security officers stood guard. Beyond them, she knew half the human delegation was maintaining a vigil. And beyond the station, warships waited. They're here because they care about you, sweetheart, she said softly. All of them. All of them, Jawan confirmed. Every human on this station. Every human in the fleet. Everyone on Earth, They all care about you, because I got hurt. Because you're one of us, Juan said, stroking his hair. And we protect our own. Minho thought about this for a moment. The Birdman who hurt me. Will he get in trouble? Yes, Juan said firmly. Yes, he will. She didn't tell her son about the warships. Didn't tell him about the ultimatum. Didn't tell him that the galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see if this would end in justice or war. He was 8 years old. He didn't need to know that the fate of interstellar peace might depend on what happened to him 20 hours after Kang Su's ultimatum. High Speaker Orndith requested a private meeting. He came alone to the human delegation's quarters, leaving his guards outside. This was unprecedented. The High Speaker never traveled without security, never met in spaces he didn't control. Kung Su and Hyun Woo received him in a conference room. No guards, no witnesses. Just 3 beings who held the fate of the galaxy in their hands. Admiral Orndith said, his eye stalks focusing on Kung Su. I need to understand something. Are you really prepared to go to war over this? Yes, Kung Su said simply. 1 child. 1 incident. You would risk everything? You don't understand, Hyu said. This isn't about 1 child. This is about what that child represents. If we let this go, if we accept your compensation and your apologies, we teach the galaxy that humans can be hurt without real consequences. We teach them that our children are acceptable targets. Nobody thinks that, Orndith protested, don't they? Kung Su pulled up a datapad. Since joining the council, humans have filed 47 formal complaints about discrimination, harassment, and assault. Do you know how many resulted in meaningful consequences? 3. Do you know why the other 44 went nowhere? Because we're new. We're weak. We don't have the power to demand real justice. He set down the datapad and looked at Orndith. But we do have warships. We do have soldiers. And we have something your peaceful species never developed. We have the willingness to use violence when necessary. So ask yourself, High Speaker, is protecting 1 officer worth finding out just how violent we can be? Orndith was quiet for a long time. His eye stalks moved independently, looking at both humans. You've studied our history. You know about the exceptions we've made? We do, Hyun-woo confirmed. Those were different situations. The Korthax Empire had the largest fleet in the galaxy. The Peltherin Collective controlled essential trade routes. The Vrix had religious significance. And humans have the willingness to turn this station into debris if you don't give us justice, Kung Su said flatly. I'm sorry if that's crude, but it's the truth. Your exceptions were made for species that had leverage. Well, High Speaker, we have leverage. We're just more direct about it. This sets a terrible precedent, Orndith said. If we give in to threats, it's not a threat, Hyun-woo interrupted. It's a promise. Hurt our children, face our justice, that's the precedent we're setting. Every species in the galaxy should understand this. Not because we're bullies, but because we're parents. Orndith, stalks drooped. The Council will never approve a full transfer of jurisdiction. Then we'll settle for a hybrid tribunal, Kung Su said. Council law, but with human representatives on the panel. Real consequences, not just dismissal and compensation. And most importantly, a guarantee that this never happens again. You want the Minho protocols, Orndith said. He had read their proposal. We want every species' children protected, Hyun-woo said. Not just ours. We want security officers trained in proper use of force for all juveniles. We want safeguards. We want accountability. Is that so unreasonable? No, Orndith admitted. It's not. But you must understand, the Council moves slowly. We build consensus. Debate. We had 6 days, Kung Su said. You had 6 days to show us that the Council protects the innocent. You had 6 days to prove that joining the Council was the right choice. Instead, you showed us that bureaucracy is more important than justice. So now we're taking matters into our own hands. Orndith stood, his massive form unfolding. Give me until tomorrow morning. I'll call an emergency session. I'll push the vote through. You have 12 hours, Kung Su said, checking his chronometer. After that, we extract Velthar ourselves. After Orndith left, Hyunwoo looked at Kung-Soo. Do you think he'll do it? He will, Kung-Soo said, because he's smart enough to understand the alternative. The Council has survived for 10,000 years by being flexible. They'll bend rather than break, and if they don't, Kung-Soo's expression was grim. Then we show them what Deathworlders really are. The emergency council session began at dawn, station time. Every council member was present, along with observers from dozens of other species. The gallery was full of beings watching to see how this would end. High Speaker Orndith called the session to order. We are here to vote on the human proposal regarding the Minho incident. Before we vote, I want to present testimony. Dr. Yoonji took the floor first. She displayed medical scans, injury reports, and comparative physiology data. She explained in clinical detail what Velthor's attack had done to Minho. She showed how the same force would have affected juvenile members of other species. The contrast was stark and disturbing. Then Juan spoke. She didn't give a political speech. She simply told them about her son, about his kindness, his curiosity, his dreams. She showed them pictures of Minho before the attack, smiling and happy. Then she showed them pictures from the hospital. That's my baby, she said, her voice breaking. That's what your officer did to my baby. And you ask us to be patient, to trust your procedures. But where was procedure when my son was bleeding on your floor? Where was justice when the being who hurt him walked free? The chamber was silent when she finished. Ambassador Hyunwoo presented the formal proposal. A hybrid tribunal to try Velthor. Implementation of the Minho protocols for all juveniles. A guarantee of human participation in any case involving human citizens. And a formal apology from the council. This is what we're asking, Hyunwoo said. Not revenge. Justice. Not special treatment. Equality. We're asking you to prove that the council stands for what it claims to stand for. Protection of all species. Justice for all beings. Safety for all children. The debate lasted 3 hours. Some council members argued against setting precedents. Others worried about the militaristic tone of the human demands. But more and more voices spoke in favor of the proposal. The Vrix supported it. The Delphi supported it. Even some Scarans, ashamed of Velthor's actions, voted yes. In the end, the vote wasn't close. 163 in favor. 37 against. The proposal passed. Velthor was arrested within the hour. Not by Scaran security, not by council guards. By human security officers who read him his rights in perfect standard and led him away in restraints. He didn't resist. He had seen the humans' faces and understood that resistance would be fatal. The trial took place 3 days later. The tribunal consisted of 3 council judges and 2 human judges. They heard testimony from witnesses, reviewed security footage, examined medical reports. Velthor's defense argued that he hadn't known human children were so fragile. It was an honest mistake. Dr. Yoonji destroyed that argument. Officer Velthor received mandatory training on human physiology when humans joined the council 3 years ago. This training specifically covered the vulnerability of human juveniles. He attended this training. He signed documentation confirming he understood. This was not ignorance. This was negligence at best, cruelty at worst. The verdict came quickly. Guilty of excessive force resulting in severe bodily harm. Guilty of negligence in the treatment of a juvenile. Guilty of violating station security protocols. The sentence was 15 years in a medium security facility on a neutral world with human observers to ensure he actually served his time. It was harsh by council standards. For humans, it felt insufficient. But it was justice. Real justice. The council also issued a formal apology to Minho, Giwan, and the human delegation. High Speaker Orndith delivered it personally in the hospital room where Minho was recovering. Young Minho, Orndith said, his voice gentle, the council has failed you. We allowed someone who should have protected you to hurt you instead. For this, we are deeply sorry. We hope you can forgive us. Minho, still weak but healing, looked at the massive alien. Will the Birdman hurt other kids? No, Orndith promised. He won't. We're making new rules to keep all children safe, Minho said. Then I forgive you, was Ornda thought. Perhaps the most gracious act of diplomacy he had ever witnessed. This small, fragile child showing more wisdom than most council members. The Minho protocols were implemented across all council stations within a month. Security officers received new training. Use of force guidelines were revised. Special protections were established for juveniles of all species, and humans were granted equal voice and enforcement oversight. 6 months later, Minho returned to Earth to complete his recovery. Jiwan took a leave of absence from diplomatic service to be with him. When they left the station, the entire human delegation came to see them off. So did representatives from dozens of other species. Captain Svemin's fleet escorted their transport ship all the way to Earth. It was both an honor guard and a reminder. Humans protected their own. Always, Jiwan returned to her post a year later. The galaxy treated her differently now. Treated all humans differently. There was respect where before there had been condescension. Caution where there had been dismissal. Other species understood something fundamental now. Humans were Deathworlders. They were predators who had learned to cooperate. They were pack hunters who had reached for the stars. And above all, they were fiercely, violently protective of their young. But something else happened. Something unexpected. Other species with weaker young, with vulnerable children, began approaching human representatives. They had problems too. They had incidents where their juveniles were hurt, where justice had been delayed or denied, and humans listened. Ambassador Hunhua found himself mediating a case involving a Vrix child who had been injured by negligent station maintenance. Lieutenant Commander Yeeman's team helped locate a kidnapped Peltherin juvenile. Dr. Yunji developed new medical protocols that saved lives across a dozen species. Humans had demanded justice for their child. But in doing so, they had opened a door. Now they protected all children. It wasn't official policy. It was just what humans did. Daeyun, still serving as security chief on Harmony 7, found himself training officers from other species, teaching them not just about human children, but about all children, teaching them that the smallest and weakest members of any society deserve the strongest protection. Why do you care about our young? A Scaran officer asked during one training session. After what happened with Minho, I would understand if you hated us. Daeon considered the question. We don't hate you. We hate what Veltor did. There's a difference. He pulled up an image of Minho, smiling and healthy, playing with other children on Earth. This is why we fought. Not for revenge. So that no child, human or otherwise, would have to suffer like Minho did. 3 years after the incident, the Galactic Council held a ceremony. They were dedicating a new juvenile protection center on Harmony 7. The center would provide medical care, counseling, and advocacy for young beings of all species. They named it the Minho Center. Minho himself attended the dedication. Now 11 years old, healthy and energetic, he had only faint scars from his ordeal. His arm had healed perfectly. The nightmares had faded. High Speaker Orndeth asked him to say a few words at the ceremony. Minho stood at the podium, looked out at the crowd of beings from across the galaxy, and spoke in a clear voice. I don't really remember what happened to me. My mom says that's okay, that maybe it's better that I don't remember. But I do remember waking up in the hospital and seeing all these people who cared about me. Humans and aliens. People I didn't even know.